Yeah, I'm Rick, and I love this neighborhood. I like being at, like Will's Garage, you know. I love that. And it's funny because I know I made my host nervous when they decided to let me or have me come speak, because they were. I'm off on a new tangent now. I've spent a lot of years working on trying to get commercial space up and running and getting the baby born, so to speak. And so now that commercial space is starting to happen, I'm off looking for the next thing. So I've started working on a thing called the Earthlight Institute. And just a quick plug on that. It's a 501c3 organization. We basically presume you've made it beyond LEO. And we're looking at human settlement of space as a cultural and a species imperative. Our slogan, if I can recall it, is to carry the seeds of life to worlds now dead, the light of life to worlds now dark, and the eyes, hands, and imaginations of humanity to worlds unseen, untouched, and unexplored. Now that's the top level stuff, but in the bottom of that, we're trying to build a spine of real engineering, real understanding of what it takes to do space development. And we have a really good group. I have Pat Rawlings, one of the top space artists, because we want to create the visual, sort of a Renaissance field of real engineering and vision. If you've been in this field, and some of you I know have been here quite a long time, if you go online and you're looking for like images of space colonies, for example, you might find one or two that are somewhat recent. Otherwise, you're going to go to the 70s. And they're somewhat dated, shall we say, like actually some of us. But it's time for a new vision. And this kind of ties into what I'm going to talk about here. But in the 70s, we had a period, I call it the coasting period, I call it the right before the big letdown. We'd just been to the moon. We had probes spreading out all over the solar system. It was a very exciting time. Coming out of a war that nobody wanted. First moments of environmental realization, which, by the way, were brought to us by images of the moon broadcast from space. And we had this program coming up, a government program called the Space Shuttle. And we were promised, Congress was promised by people pushing it, that the Space Shuttle was going to fly 50 to 100 times a year. Anything was possible. Organizations were born. There was a great wave of hope in the land. We're going. We're going. 50 to 100 times a year? $10, $100 a pound to orbit? Space colonies, space cities. We were going to have them. They were one of the organizations at the time, the L5 Society. Their slogan was L5 by 95. Now, L5 is a point where basically the gravitational forces of the Earth and the Moon, or any two bodies orbiting in space, there are certain areas called libration points, Lagrangian points by the fellow who discovered them, where the gravity sort of neutralized. Basically, if you put something there, it's going to stay. You don't have to use a lot of propellant, things like that. So the L5 Society we were going to build L5 colonies. It was a great moment of hope. I mean, there was a lot going to happen. The future was going to happen. And then reality struck. The government program didn't happen. What we thought would happen never occurred. And we were let down. Some of us got a little angry. Some of us went off and started doing other things. Some of us actually did dig in and start trying to make things happen. What was interesting, one side note, parenthetically, was that the program that had led us up to that point had actually inspired a generation. There were geeks who had stayed in school and studied and gone through school and studied their math and science and all that good stuff. And you know, watched Star Trek and Star Wars and Captain Kirk getting the babes and this and that and the other and all this really cool stuff going on and Han Solo, etc. These people stayed in school and they formed companies, .com companies. And they made scads of money. Now in the meantime, a bunch of us were still out there slogging away and fighting battle after battle after battle, trying to get these vehicles, the commercial companies going. Fighting with the government many, many times, intersecting in a very bad way, sort of a truck meets grasshopper way at times. But what's interesting is the inspiration of the government program, the Apollo program, did inspire a generation which has come sweeping back in now. It's almost like the cavalry has arrived to some of us. And on very expensive horses. And they're doing some amazing things. And what I'm seeing now is, as we're coming into the beginning of the second decade of the 21st century, is an interesting period of time where we have environmental crises again, wars that may or may not be popular in certain sectors, technology advancing at a rapid rate, our vision expanding greatly, and the promise of a new future held right in front of this new generation. So we have a new generation. It's almost like we're repeating history again. You know, the past is prequel.
Only with a little bit less bullshit.
A little bit less bullshit, except within 3 feet of where I'm standing. And look at what's happening, though, this time. We have a different set of potential means of having this dream delivered. We have all of these companies now. Instead of one government entity, our bets are spread. The visions are spread. I don't know if you've been on the internet. If you're here, you have an interest in space, obviously, or you're very, very lost, and the Kiwanis meeting is down the hall. But probably both, right? If you look at these vehicles, Doug's working on X-Core, Armadillo, Maston, SpaceX, Sierra Nevada, Orbital Sciences, all of these different companies, they're all different. All the concepts are different, etc. But the one thing they do share is a dream. They all share the same dream, the human settlement of space. Now, I'm going to give you a brief definition from one of the books I will never write called Rick's Handy Dandy Guide to Space, so that you know when you run into people. I put this in Pop Sci a few years ago, but it's basically when you run into people in the space field, you're going to run into 3 kinds of people. All right? Now, there are the Saganites. Some of you have heard this before, but it's always good to hear these things again because, well, I said them. But there are the Saganites, which are, space is big. Billions and billions of stars. Isn't it grand? Look at this. Look at God's universe, God's hand writ large. Look at it. But don't touch it. Okay, don't touch. Look at it through telescopes, send a few probes. I call them toasters in space, whatever. Don't touch it. Now, I love that. That's the astronomers. That's the people sending rovers and things like that. That's great. That's a great, I have no issue there. Most people don't realize that Sagan was against nasty human beings in space originally, by the way. He eventually came around to government employees in space, and he was against nasty civilians in space, and towards the end of his life, he began to adopt it. Now I'll come back to that in a second. Now, then there's the von Braunians. The von Braunians are, what we will do space with your dollars, and you'll be very proud. You'll see sitting on your couch, and you will watch how expensive it is. It's thrust into space with very, very large vehicles. We shoot them up, we don't know where they come down, but you will be very, very proud of us. Anyway, I don't have a problem with von Braun. My mother was English, and she used to go see which one of her neighbors' houses had been blown up by V1s or 2s. We're British, we hold grudges. Anyway, the thing with the von Braunians is that's the NASA program up until now. That's the government program. State socialism, command economy. Then there's the O'Neillians. Now, Jerry O'Neill, I'm biased, was my boss. Jerry O'Neill wrote a book called The High Frontier. I was speaking to a young space engineer in here earlier who didn't know who Jerry O'Neill was. You cannot work in this field about putting human beings in space unless you read Jerry O'Neill, unless you know who he is. And Robert Heinlein, but that's just the fun part and how you party. But you have to know Jerry O'Neill. Jerry O'Neill, again, didn't have really a funny accent. He had a Beatle haircut, which he had till the end of his days. But his idea was take your tools, your imaginations, move into space, harvest the resources you find there, and expand civilization and life beyond the Earth. Jerry O'Neill is the father of our movement. Now, he had a particular vision of going to what we call free space and building colonies and space solar power satellites and things like that. But in the way I look at it, because many of us came from him, we used to call ourselves Jerry's kids at one point. Some of the guys here have been to some of the conferences back then. We came from him with a point of view that said, we can do it. I'm a college dropout. All right? Why? Because I was smarter than my teachers and they kept walking out of every class. Yeah, right. They were brilliant. And yet, I was able to get into the space field. I was able to sit down with Cherry O'Neill and Freeman Dyson, and they would listen. Now I have a spacesuit company. I've been in front of Congress a few times. One of the few people in the room to have actually owned part of a space station for, well, a couple of months. And we lost it. It sank in the swamp. But anyway.
First it burned down.
First it burned down. Then we built another. And it sank too. Anyway, the point is that we are believers in human settlement. Now, if you look at space, and you look at it through a historical lens, it would seem obvious to any thinking being that that is the next frontier. It is the grandest frontier of all times. The harsh realities of opening space relative to the technological base that we have currently and our capabilities are not really that much greater than those faced by the people who opened the first frontiers of this new world. I'm going to use the new world of North and South America as my example. More north than south, it's a little more PC. They had a little rougher experience down there. But I want you to understand that what we see above us, what we see out there, what we see up, my favorite slogan is up the frontier. What we see up there represents an entire new paradigm of human existence. And by the way, we get to use the paradigm word. Okay, a new interface on your iPhone is not a new paradigm. We, however, in this movement are engaged at something at the Copernican level. You are a part of it if you're participating, and I hope you do. So, given that potential that was out there, and recognized all the way back to Konstantin Tsiolkovsky, Goddard, even the German GRS, German Rocket Society, and others, recognized this potential. What happened was we ended up in a war situation where we had to do basically a demonstration of technological prowess. And what was really, really interesting about that was that faced by a command economy, centrally controlled socialist threat, we responded with a command economy, centrally controlled socialist response called the Apollo program. We took government dollars, put them into a big quasi-military project, and we went to the moon. Now, unfortunately, what happens in a democracy is over time, you can lose your way on these sorts of things. You can imagine that Nixon, who hated Kennedy, when he became president, would wake up every morning and hear about the whole Apollo program and just go nuts. I would have hated to have been his wife. You know, oh, God, that Kennedy guy. I can't, he's not even here and he's pissing me off. I mean, you know. And what happened, though, is you're basically a potential victim of the vicissitudes of what can happen in very, very narrow realms of ideological thought and change and shift as parties change and things like that. So we ended up with a space program that took the moon. We took the beach of the moon. But we couldn't hold it. There was no way to hold it. We sent soldiers to take the moon. Now, part of this comes from a real misunderstanding, frankly, of history. If you look at the history, I'll come back to the New World, as I said here, of North and South America, there was no government conquering of North and South America. That's a myth. Most of the conquistadors, for example, were freelancers. They weren't soldiers of Spain. They weren't government employees. Some of them would retire, things like that. They would cut deals. I'll give you a little piece of this. I'll give part of this to the crown. Isabella, followed by, I blanked on his name, not Ferdinand, but whoever followed Isabella, would get a piece of it. And anything you get, you know, as long as you go out and you kneel down, you plant flags, say we declare it in the name of Spain, okay, good. These were freebooters. There was no big army from Spain that marched into, that never happened. North America, same thing. The closest to a government invasion that occurred during that period of time in this new world, South America and Australia, was the fact that Britain shipped a bunch of prisoners to Australia. That was the closest to a colony of government employees that actually occurred.
Actually, they did that in Georgia first.
Georgia as well, yes. These are prisoners, though. You know, there were no government, real big, you know, maybe a little experiment here and there, a little this and that. Overall, no, didn't occur that way. But in our myths, in our culture, we made that happen in our heads. It didn't happen that way. It's not going to happen that way in space. Space will not be opened and settled by governments, but by people with the support of or in spite of their governments. Key point. With the support of or in spite of their governments. As the shuttle came down on that landing a few months ago, a lot of pundits, a lot of, I was about to say ancient astronauts, sorry, a lot of senior astronauts, heroes. I'll be with them this weekend in Arizona, so, but they were all decrying the end of America's space program. It's over. The program is over. Oh God, we're doomed. The decline of America has begun. In a sense, yes, das Programm is probably over.
Ish kaputt.
Ish kaputt, ja. Ja. Sorry, I was Russian there. Ja. It's kaput. The program is winding down. And contrary to some of those people who then jumped over to the Romney campaign, like former NASA Director Mike Griffin, it ain't coming back. I don't care who the next president is going to be. It ain't happening. It's over. It's truly over. Because what we have now is the rise. It's almost as if you cut the big tree down and the sprouts are coming up now. Where that used to. I've been spending a lot of time in East Texas lately, clearing brush and planting trees, literally. And, which by the way, is cool. I want to let you know, I'm a tree hugger. I'm a technologist, but I'm a tree hugger. And that's perfectly fine because in the new paradigm of space, all the old debates and arguments don't make sense anymore. Our civilization has been characterized by an attack on what we call the ecosystem, the living systems of the Earth. For the first time in human history, that's going to be reversed in space. The expansion of a technological civilization will carry with it the seeds of life. We're flipping everything on its head. But back to the main topic. What has happened now is we're seeing the shift. We're seeing the rise of a new commercial space industry, inspired by das Programm, inspired by the Apollo program. We'll get away from that for a minute. I don't want to beat them up too much. There's some really good people in the program. Hundreds of thousands, actually. A lot of good people did a lot of good work. And on the shoulders of these people, on the shoulders of these giants, we're building this new program. Now, the question is, as this new program rises and develops, I don't want to use the word program. I fell right into that. As this new industry rises, as this new wave moves forth and out from the planet Earth, the question is going to be, how does that program stay relevant? See, we could actually have a situation in 10 years where NASA basically dies of embarrassment. The Senate launch system, which is the government socialist rocket of de jour, will be dead of embarrassment probably within 3 to 5 years, max. That's probably an outside estimate. Why would it die of embarrassment? Because Falcon 9, Falcon Heavy, Sierra Nevada, orbital sciences, etc. It's going to be embarrassing. How do you keep pitching this thing that's sucking money when outside the door, when you're going in and you're looking, when you're at Starbucks on the screen, in between congressional sessions, you're watching this stuff happen. We had this great anachronism. I was at the International Space Development Conference this weekend, and we had the head of NASA up on stage talking in front of a giant screen where the docking was occurring. Excuse me, birthing was occurring. Birthing being an interesting analogy we don't even have to talk about. Think about that. The head of NASA telling us everything's great with the NASA program and everything's just cruising along fine and we're so happy about this. And this private sector rocket or spaceship is docking or berthing with the space station. The symbolism can't be lost. In fact, however, in a broad sense, the symbolism is completely lost. If you think about it, a few weeks ago, about 2 months ago, Newt Gingrich, some of you just shivered. Newt Gingrich gave a speech and talked about putting a base on the moon. He was laughed off the stage. The political class, the media class just tore into him. He ended up actually apologizing for it when he shut down his campaign. 4 weeks later, 3 weeks later, some of the richest, most astute, brilliant billionaires on the planet announced they were going to mine asteroids. Disconnect. Complete cultural disconnect. Our political class, our media class, doesn't get what's happening right in front of them. The astronauts are saying in media and other places that we had the spirit back in the days of Apollo. We were the ones. Man, you should have seen all those people in little white shirts and little narrow ties working their asses off to get us to the moon. They had the spirit. You know what? Go to X-Corps. Go to SpaceX. Go to one of these companies. Go to science classes. Go to science fairs. See what's happening. The generation is here right now. It's happening. Some of you are that generation. It's happening right now. So what do? Do we continue to pour billions and billions of dollars every year into the black hole of government waste? Or do we take that investment? Because if you think about it, the American public has very generously agreed that 17 whatever billion dollars a year will be given to space. Given. Think about it, $100 billion space station. That was supposed to be, by the way, when Reagan promised it, space station was going to be built by 92, 93 for $8 billion. 100 billion plus after they threw out all the cool stuff. And it's not done. And now we have to go back and redo everything, like centrifuges and all this good stuff that we needed the first time around. And they kept giving the money. And the shuttle. God bless it, nice, beautiful, incredibly complicated machine. Complete, utter, absolute failure. Cool, but a failure. And they kept giving the money. Billions more. Here you go. Here you go. You just see like mom and pop, taxpayer, mom and dad. They're talking to each other like, Johnny's an addict. I don't know. He's like that commercial where they're talking about their insurance or something, and the robbers are walking out past the person with the refrigerator, and they're stealing the stereo, and they take her. That's it. She talks about, those people are stealing us blind, and they take her glasses and walk out. And they kept giving us the money. So we have an agreement.
So
yes.
Can you address why is the space shuttle a failure when to most people they see it took people to space, they did experiments, it assembled the ISS, so...
Right.
They see it as an icon.
They do see it as an icon.
So why is it...
It's a failure because it was supposed to fly 50 times a year. It will do this. It didn't do that. Cost per, oh God. Yeah. Actually gone up since Apollo, right?
Right.
More expensive, right.
Congress was complaining bitterly that $500 per pound to low Earth orbit on a Saturn V was unacceptable. So they built the shuttle, which cost $10,000 to $20,000 per pound to low Earth orbit, because that was an improvement.
Right, exactly. So that's the kind of thing we have going on now. And we have a chance now to begin changing that. And we have one of the great things we have right now is we have the existence proof of people like SpaceX flying. We have people who've been saying this for a while. And we have actually some friends in NASA, former Lori Garver, other people like that. The question, though, is, what is the role in the future? What do we do? I'd like to hear some ideas. What do you think, moving ahead, after my little diatribe here, what do you think we should do?